What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today Vibranium Mines is the featured location, so I'm trying to make the biggest Darkhawk possible. This is a deck that I showcased in yesterday's video and Snap.fan article, and today we're going to take a look at some of my favorite games with the deck. I'm calling it Hawk and Lock, because we're playing some lockdown cards that encourage your opponent to play into Vibranium Mines, the featured location, and that'll give us a huge Darkhawk +6 power every time our opponents have to play to Vibranium Mines. And I think the best way to force your opponent to play to Vibranium Mines is just going to be with Jean Grey. I think that Jean Grey is a card that's actually been a little bit under the radar for a little bit. I tested it out in Cerebro 3 maybe like 2 months ago, and honestly, I was pretty happy with the results. This card can actually just win you some games. And of course, with Vibranium Mines, it's very specific what we're trying to do here. We're going to force our opponent to play into that featured location and just make our Darkhawks grow with that. And this is like a great just like basic game to showcase to start things off. You can see we're also a Mr. Negative deck. We've also got some ramp and things. This deck can do some crazy stuff. And in this game, we're just playing Jean Grey on turn 3 into an empty Vibranium Mines, which also has the upside of kind of disrupting my opponent's ability to fill up the raft. They're going to need to have 2 cheap cards now in order to fill up the raft before, well, too much longer. And on turn 4, they just have Quinjet. So nothing super exciting going on. Quinjet, by the way, used to discount Vibranium and no longer does, which is an unfortunate way that you can't build around it. Now, one thing that's weird with Vibranium Mines and Jean specifically is that Vibranium Mines gives you a cheap card to bypass Jean's restriction and then allows you to play into other locations. So that can be a kind of awkward part about the deck, but we're just having fun here. On turn 5, I'm going to play Vibranium and then Darkhawk. That order is very important because we're trying to Mystique the Darkhawk to get that power in multiple lanes. That's a really important part of the deck. Or just an important part of Marvel Snap, I should say. You gotta win multiple locations. My opponent will snap here on turn 5. I think that means they're gonna fill up the raft, but we are gonna have a huge Darkhawk to take them to task. One awkward thing with Jean can be like trying to play Arnim Zola. Doesn't really matter here because my opponent has armor in the raft, so I won't be able to split up my Darkhawk and win 2 locations in that way. But one thing my opponent was maybe not expecting is that they fill up the raft, get a free 6-cost card, and then discarded it to their Blade, which they play on the penultimate turn here, so they won't get that free Spectrum, and that should mean that we're going to have enough power with another 18 power Mystique plus Vibranium to go just a little bit more over the top in Shadowland, in case my opponent has drawn any Vibranium themselves. They could soak some power into Sunspot, but they are going to have to give me at least 6 more power into Darkhawk this turn, barring like Jeff, the baby Landshark. That would be one way they could get around this. But barring that, they're going to have to soak some power into Sunspot to win in the raft, and we're going to be building up Darkhawk more than they could possibly hope to soak. So this should be a win here, especially with another 18 power Mystique in that center lane. Let's see what my opponent has got cooked up for us though. And we'll flip over Mystique and then Vibranium, and my opponent has, right, the Ebony Blade for 7, and then just Vibranium over in Shadowland. Not quite gonna cut it against my 24 power Darkhawk. You know what, I'm gonna keep going. Let's just keep it, no editing here, we're doing it live. 24 power, I think is, and I think I said this in the article or yesterday's video, or at least I meant to, 24 is like the power that Darkhawk should be most of the time, because it is traditionally 6 power, and then if it gets 6 power a few more times from your opponent playing into Vibranium Mines, it should hit that 24 number. That's basically what I am generally expecting to see. This game, we've got Ravonna to play Darkhawk plus Mystique together on the final turn. We can also Psylocke out a turn for Legion, so that's going to mean that there's a ton of Vibranium in this game. I'll just throw the Psylocke into Murder World. We're going to turn all the locations into Legion. Actually, yeah, I guess I pivot. Interesting that my opponent decided to play for Murder World there, but they're going to play Magic, which really complicates this. And this was an interesting game too that I wanted to look at, because I actually have an incredible amount of lines that I can do here on turn 4 with Ravonna, making my cards a little bit cheaper. I could play Darkhawk plus Mystique. That's like a possibility. I could play Legion into Vibranium Mines. That costs exactly 5. I could play Goose plus Mystique plus Nebula. That could be pretty good too. The one thing that's awkward here, I do think I want to play Legion as soon as possible. The problem with that is now that my opponent has played Magic to activate Limbo, I think they'll probably retreat to Legion, whereas if I play Legion on turn 6, I could get more cubes. So this is kind of like a debate of like, am I trying to go for cubes here, or am I trying to go for cool highlights? And I'm trying to go for cool highlights. So I'm going to play Legion into Vibranium Mines. I think if I wanted to actually just win this game and win the most cubes, the play was just, honestly, probably Goose, Mystique, Nebula, and lock my opponent out of whatever other shenanigans they were doing, and then just used a Legion to turn off Limbo on the final turn and surprise them. But I'm just going to play Legion on turn 4. That was just kind of like proof of concept. The deck can play Legion turn 4, and it's pretty cool. It's a cool line a decent amount of the time. Unfortunately, that's going to make my opponent on that one concede. But I've still got 2 more games that are pretty sweet. This one, well, we're going to play Legion on turn 3. Turn 2, we get to play Psylocke, which is going to give us 5 energy on turn 3. And then we can play Legion and make every location into one of the locations. We just kind of have to hope that Vibranium Mines shows up. Hasn't quite shown up yet, but I'm gonna gamble for it. I'll play Psylocke on turn 2, and I'm just gonna hope that that third location is going to be the Vibranium Mine, so we can do some sweet stuff here. Yondu takes out my Mr. Negative. Great, didn't take out my Darkhawk, so we are still live here. Unfortunately, I do not have priority. My opponent's beating me by 1, but fortunately, we do have Vibranium Mines. Priority into Vibranium Mines this turn would have been absolutely insane. It was possible if my opponent played like Yondu Center or something. Not sure if this is a bot or not, by the way, but turn 3, Legion into Vibranium Mines. I do still have to draw the Darkhawk, that's why I haven't snapped. But if I'm able to draw the Darkhawk, this is a pretty sweet one, I think. So, and that's the other awkward thing with the deck. I did definitely bring this up yesterday. I mean, we draw the Darkhawk because, you know, I'm NoLucksGiven. It's going to happen. But as you play cards into Vibranium Mines, like Nebula and Jean, both want to get played into Vibranium Mines early, and that can make it tricky to find your Darkhawk. I didn't have too much of a problem with that with the deck, though it definitely did come up some. There's going to be some frustration points with that if you try this deck out yourself. Just let me put in the hard work here for you and farm up some nice fun clips. So go for the turn 4 Darkhawk, and now I can play like turn 5 Mystique. Then I have to decide what I want to do turn 6, if I just want to wait and drop Artem Zola. I figure I'm probably going to draw more Vibranium, and ultimately, like, I could just hold on to Taskmaster here and not play the Vibranium, just play Vibranium Taskmaster on the final turn. I figured it was fine, though, to just play Mystique and then next turn play like Taskmaster and Vibranium Mines. We're looking like we're going to be pretty good in that third Vibranium Mines location, and yeah, it might even be a bot here. Nobody really plays Angel, and they didn't do anything like super crazy with their wave either. So yeah, this is another one that's just like, okay, I thought it was pretty cool. I got to play a turn 3 Legion, right? And make some pretty big Darkhawks because of that. My opponent will retreat here on the final turn of the game. I'm trying to think if I completed the point I was just trying to make a few moments ago. I think I did. Let's move on to the next one. My opponent is going to retreat there, and this is the game of the video. possibly making its way into the thumbnail. I'm not entirely sure, but this was a really good one. You can see we're already set up extremely well on turn 1. I've got Ravona into Mr. Negative, and we already have Vibranium Mines as the featured location. We also have Storm plus Goose, which I can use to lock down both of the other 2 locations, which means that my opponent will be forced into playing into Vibranium Mines at some point, and then I can do some crazy stuff where I don't really have to play into Vibranium Mines, and I can kind of get around it all with Mr. Negative and surprise my opponent with a bunch of power. I'm going to drop Ravona into Shuri's lab on turn 2. Seems as good a place as any, and that'll pop up to a 6 power Ravona. And I actually have priority here because my opponent has laid down the hood. Though that goes away quickly when Atlantis is flipped over on turn 3. And then I draw Legion, which is actually one of the best draws in my deck, because if I don't draw Legion before I play Mr. Negative, then Legion flips into a 6/5, which is a little bit awkward. That's you know, there can be some awkward pains in the deck, but we're having fun here. So I'm now going to Mr. Negative my deck, and now I'm definitely losing to my opponent's 20 power in Shuri's lab. But I do have Jean Grey to force my opponent to play into Vibranium Mines. This is where I said the deck can get awkward, because I still need to draw Darkhawk. So I have to decide, and ultimately I decide it's just not worth it to play Jean here into that Vibranium Mines and shuffle more Vibranium into my deck. I want to make sure I find Darkhawk. I already snapped, so I'm a little bit invested in that as well. My opponent plays Magic into Limbo, which kind of sets me up well. Again, I have the decision to make. Do I want to turn off Limbo on this turn, or do I want to surprise my opponent on next turn? And you know, we're going for the highlights. So I'm going to slam Legion down into Vibranium Mines on turn 5 here. Could also play Jean. That could be interesting, but I'm just going to play Legion into the Vibranium Mines, and then we'll see what we can make happen. Yeah, we'll see if my opponent is willing to stay in it and not retreat. And I'm losing by like a pretty considerable amount here. I've got -4 power to their 8 in Atlantis. They're beating me by 14 power. Oh, well, not anymore, right? But I'm losing by 7, winning by... Actually, I'm losing by 1, losing by 14, and then losing by 7. So pretty free snap on my opponent's part, and was part of the reason I thought that they might stay in it. However, we get to play a huge Darkhawk, copy it with Taskmaster, and then Arnim Zola in 50/50, maybe hit those Darkhawks and get, you know, a free Darkhawk out of that. Or maybe just hit Legion, which wouldn't do anything, except put a 6 additional power into Vibranium Mines, which is also totally fine. So we're good either way there. Was just verifying the play for a second, and picked up the cards. Wasn't going to Arnim Zola, the Mr. Negative, don't worry. But this looks like a pretty good play to me. My opponent drops 3 cards on the final turn, and that just means that we're going to have an even bigger Darkhawk for this final game of the video. They drop She-Hulk armor and Vibranium. And I've got a 40 power Darkhawk and a 40 power Taskmaster. And you already know NoLucksGiven is going to hit that Darkhawk as well. So 3 40 power cards for this final one to finish it off. That is going to be it for me today. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace. Oh, yeah. We could take a look. My opponent was a good sport about it, by the way, but yeah, there is the 40 power Darkhawk in all its glory, 4 power from Mr. Negative, 36 power from the 18 cards in my opponent's deck right there. Pretty crazy. Have a good one.